All right. We are returning. You know, we're going to cover in this segment the climate change fraud that's being perpetrated on America and the world. But before we go there, I just want to put in a final comment about this Syrian nonsense. This thing has really got nothing to do with Syria. And I got to tell you, it's insulting to the Syrian people who were killed in this war. Their estimates range from 140,000 to 200,000 people that have died in this Syrian conflict. The estimates range from 400 to 1,400 who have died as a result of this chemical weapons attack, who we don't even know who's responsible. Now, that's 1%. And I got to tell you, it's an insult to the other 99% who have been killed by other chemical attacks, which we've completely ignored, by the way, as well as, look, to the dead, I really don't think they care why innocence was killed. And I think the world ought to recognize that the idea of this chemical attack being the motivating factor to go and attack Assad is really so far beyond the concepts of justice. Because if you're killed by a bomb or a bullet or gas murder is murder is murder is murder. Where have we been for the last couple of years on this issue? We've had years to build and formulate an international coalition to go after Assad in an appropriate and fashioned way where we would have had the UN backing and the backing of China and Russia and, all the other countries that are out there, so that, one, we could have done this not in a crisis scenario, but in a well-measured and articulated plan. But we can't now. We can't now because these guys have committed us to a position which we can't even back away from at this point. You got idiots out there like Kerry giving this guy a week to turn in his chemical weapons, which everybody knows is not going to happen. And then he threatens to give him such a pinch if he doesn't. I'm insulted. And so are the dead. All right, I'm going to talk about something else that you ought to be insulted about. And I already am. And that is this argument about global warming. Now, it's global cooling. A record return of the Arctic ice cap because it's grown by 60% in one single year. 1 year. You know what? There's a graphic here, and this is linked on our Facebook page and on our website. It's an article from the Daily Mail in the UK. Isn't it funny, by the way, how so much great news comes out of the Daily Mail in UK and the Telegraph in the UK? Why is it that we constantly have to wait to get information from foreign ministries of propaganda because our own nation won't tell us what's really actually happening? Our own ministries of propaganda, the major news networks, the major newspapers in the country, all of them are implicit and complicit in this concept of feeding America nothing but chalk and pabulum in an effort to dissuade them from actually being invested in the concepts of their own demise, frankly. I find that disturbing, to say the least. And to me, here we are, in a crisis scenario on a number of fronts, and half the best news doesn't come from the United States to educate its own populace about what's really happening. We got to find it in foreign sources. Okay, just another irony to point out, but there's so many of them at this point. If I started listing them now, we could go until midnight. There's more than 1 million square miles of ocean that have been covered with ice in less than a year. More than 1 million square miles. And here's the problem. Here's my problem with it. Science no longer apparently represents science. I mean, when we talk about scientists, you know, when I was a kid growing up, scientists were looked upon with some level of reverence and respect. Not reverence, really, but respect and credibility. In other words, when you looked at a scientist when I was a kid, you thought to yourself, that's something I would aspire to. There's a guy who spends all of his time doing research and testing and probing and finding truth. Now science appears to be more like a political propaganda arm. And I don't know about you, but that bothers me. It bothers me because what it means really is that we've lost our ability to trust any aspect of purity in anything. You know, science when I was a kid was kind of the idea that you tested, you retested, you shared ideas with other peers who were also interested in learning and understanding and truth. And now it's more like a, propaganda arm. And to make things even worse, Interior Secretary Sally Jewell addressed her employees about a month ago on the moral imperative to address climate change. And she reminded them that they were actually, quote, actually able to do something about it. She called it a moral imperative. And then she went on to make the fatal statement, I hope there are no climate change deniers in the Department of Interior. Really? Climate change deniers? I hope that was a veiled threat, first and foremost. What that tells you is if you are a climate change denier and you're in the Department of the Interior, you'd better keep your mouth shut and you'd better not buck the system. Because I'll do something about it if you do. Because it's a moral imperative. That is a threat. In no uncertain terms. But making matters worse is the empirical proof is out there. I mean, you can't deny 1 million square miles of ice. So what is it about global warming that has so undermined the scientific community? What is it about global warming that has taken people who ordinarily we would have trusted to be independent and qualified critical thinkers and turned them into nothing more than a bullhorn? I believe that what it really is the polarization of political ideologies on the planet. And that polarization, if you were to sit there and part the Red Sea with your hands, as God could do. A certain amount of water is going to leak out from this side, and a certain amount of water is going to leak out from that side. And what we have now is a parting of the left and a parting on the right. And I don't mean political left and right. What we have is a parting of the elitists and the rest of us. And these scientists trickle out from between the fingers, if you will. Climate change is, and always has been, another fraud that has been perpetrated on America and the rest of the world to institute a few basic things. One, control. Absolute dictatorial control. They control you via these initiatives to reduce carbon footprint and all of that nonsensical garbage. Secondarily, they control money. They are utilizing the issue of carbon footprint to act like a sponge on the resources of the planet, to draw money out of industry and people. The real reason, and I got to tell you something. I've had people say to me, well, what makes you think that these global bankers are really interested in money? I mean, they have more than they could ever spend. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's not about more money. It's about using money as a weapon and a tool to break down the rest of us into a unified lowest common denominator of have-nots. You see, if people have money, they can fight back in various ways. Politically, physically. But if you take the money, they have no means by which to fight, irrespective of how strong their political will or their self-preservation will may be. And if you take a moment and you look at the U.S. and the world's primary initiatives, you'll notice that every single one of them comes with one primary element. And that is the derogation of your rights in some way, shape, or form or another. And with that comes total abject control of either money or your power or your rights. When we look at the issue of global warming and climate change, that takes the form of saying we can draw money from the resource pool of the world by charging these people for carbon credits and setting up these carbon exchanges as if it's a stock market. I mean, who's selling you what? It's smoke and mirrors. How do you buy a molecule of smoke? And how do you hold it? How do you touch it? How do you trade it? You don't. It doesn't, because it doesn't exist. It's like setting up you may as well set up a market to buy and sell stars. It's all meaningless because you can't get to it, and even if you could, what are you going to do with it? You see, it's not about it's not about actually the carbon. It's about getting your money. It's about imposing their will on you in a derogation of your rights. Your right to operate, your right to work, your right to run a farm, your right to run a business, your right to invest in your own desires, your right to invest in your own vehicles, your own financial vehicles, so that you can improve your own lot in life. It's about your life, your liberty, your right to protect it, and your right to hold on to that which you have earned. When you take that away from people, they become dejected. And when they become dejected, they become irrational and irate. They become angry. But if they have no money as the means by which to turn around and fight back, then there's no risk to you. See, climate change, first of all, they sit there and say that the scientific community is 100% in agreement. It's not. It's not even close. And the sycophantic press, the Ministry of Propaganda in this country, backs that argument. But the simple truth is, folks, that if you go and look at the bevy of scientists who have come out and said, this is all a farce, they outweigh those who have betrayed the purity of science for whatever ideological or financial or political gain they've gotten. But you never hear their voices. Because in order for you to hear their voices, it's got to be broadcast by whom? The news, the papers, the articles. Somewhere, somebody's got to say, hey, these guys disagree. But you never hear their voice. The Ministry of Propaganda doesn't want you to hear their voice. And so all you hear is those who are in agreement. Well, let me tell you something. Those who are not in agreement vastly outweigh those who are. And when it's proven, as time will often expose the lie, now they turn around and they say, well, it's global cooling now. Hold on a minute. Now they're throwing out that we should look for the next ice age. You can't win with these people because every event now that occurs is weather related. Well, it's all because of, let me tell you something. Every global initiative that you see, every one, whether that is preserving, and this is all Agenda 21 driven. It's all driven by the need to limit your ability and your rights to, one, have control over your own destiny, and two, to steal any power and resources that you have to back up your power. How do they steal it? By imposing carbon credits that then companies will have to buy in order to produce the product, which means what? Well, first of all, they're the ones running the carbon trading scheme, so they're the ones who are benefiting. They get all this money for nothing. It's like the Fed. They print it up out of nowhere. The carbon exchanges actually get money for something that doesn't even exist. And what does that do? Well, it raises prices for everyone, for every product, whether it be a shoe or whether it be a horse, or whether it's an automobile, or a house, or a real estate, commercial building. Everything has a carbon footprint. And so the amount of that hidden tax that draws money and wealth and resources from the globe is directly tied to the carbon footprint of whatever topic we're talking about. What does that do? That gives them abject control over your money. Not that they need more, not that they even want more. All they're trying to do is steal the resource from you so you can't fight back. You ever heard the adage, an army can't fight on an empty stomach? Well, this is no different. An army can't fight without money. And so they are slowly but surely drawing money off of you, like taking a sponge and setting it on a plate of water. And it draws all the water in. Draws in all the resources. Draws in all the money. Draws in all the strength, all the power. And you are left naked and helpless. Now, what comes next? That's the real question. What comes after the massive derogation of all of your rights and all of your money? What comes after the theft? What comes after the theft of not only your monetary resources, but your human rights, i.e., the right to own a weapon and defend yourself, the right to free speech, the right to not incriminate yourself, the right to have privacy and security. Have you not noticed the total assault that is going down on every American about these issues? Your guns are under fire. Your money's being stolen. Your right to speak out and have free speech and redress your grievances with your government is being chipped away. And the chips are becoming bigger and bigger and bigger with every swing of the axe. Your right to own a firearm and defend yourself is, for all intents and purposes, with every place in the world except the United States, has been eliminated. And now they've turned all of their efforts on us. Your Fourth Amendment right against or to enable you to have privacy in your own home, in your effects. They're working away at it every single day. The NSA is an example. It's the tip of the iceberg, though, folks. I mean, you get pulled over by a police officer and they treat you already as if you are guilty of something. They just haven't found out what it is yet. And it's building an acceptance level in the population of America. It's building a level of acquiescence. Not just in America, the world. And listen, trust me, a lot of the world has already given into it. They've already acquiesced to it. They've already capitulated. We're the holdout. So they're hammering away at us. And because they don't have to fight against their own populations, they can put the full force and effect of their firepower on our shield. Have you noticed it's crumbling lately? This isn't about global warming. This isn't about climate change. And why did the name go from global warming to climate change? Because once global warming was disproven, they couldn't use the word global warming anymore, so they redefined it. Ergo verbicide. You've heard me use that word before. What does that mean? That means taking definitions and changing them so that they don't mean what we construe them to mean. That means redefining them legally. And they do that by just putting in a redefinition in the Federal Register. Global warming means. Global cooling means. Climate change means. And then they define that in ways that you would look at and say, that's not what that means at all. But for the purposes of the rules and the regulations by myriad administrative agencies that are extra-constitutional in their basic nature, it means a lot. It's how they can walk in and take your money and steal your farm. It's how they walk in and they take your property by eminent domain and they remove it from your possession. It's how they can walk in and fine you under the EPA for trying to build on a piece of land you own or thought you owned. If you look at each of the world's initiatives, the war against weaponry, the war against climate change, these are all concepts that require one primary element: the derogation of your rights in either money or power or those physical inherent rights that you are given based on the fact that you're a human being alive on the planet, the ones God and nature gave you. And the one common denominator that runs throughout every one of them is that you've got to give up your human rights, your money, your power, your authority to them. In order to solve this problem, this crisis in the making, which doesn't really exist. Harvard law study out there just came out the other day about guns. And they did an international evaluation. And they said that those countries that have the strongest gun control have the highest murder rates. My goodness, how could that be? It's what we gun owners have known all along, isn't it? It's not guns that kill people. It's people that kill people. And I got to tell you, the one thing nobody wants you to know is that 99.9% of all people that have been murdered in the last century, they died at the hands of government. At the hands of government. And that ought to tell you something. We'll be right back.